Welcome back. Speed at the bottom of the helix. Now we're going to see how to build a DPM structure. Our presenter is usually seen delivering modeling with the Masters clinics. Today we are getting tips and tricks to build the perfect model. Welcome to another MMR, Mr. Clark Koenig.
Well, thanks very much, Gert. Let's see if I can figure out how to share the screen, and we'll go from there. How's that, everybody? We're good. All right. So, welcome to the NMRA. Should be in presentation mode now.
Under view.
How's that, guys?
Still showing the slides on the left.
Okay. Let's see.
You will need to share again.
Yeah.
Marty, we should have some elevator music for these moments. There we go.
We're good now. Okay, guys?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I apologize for that for all the viewers out there. Usually it goes a lot smoother. Anyway, let's talk about, first of all, myself. If you don't know me, my name is Clark Koenig, and I'm MMR 25. I've done a few things. I've been vice president of the NMRA, and I work in many scales, which is an advantage. I also live in Elliott Lake, Ontario, which is way up on the top of Lake Huron. And I've been a retired paramedic. I was 35 years in frontline service. So to all those who are frontline workers and emergency responders, big hats off to you during this pandemic. Where's Elliott Lake? Well, it's way up in northern Ontario. We're about a 10-hour drive from Chicago, 6 hours from the Toronto area, and about an 8-hour drive from Detroit. And we are in the middle of almost nowhere. It's a lot of bush and fantastic lakes and great fishing up here, winter or summer. So what we're going to do is do an introduction to building DPM structures. DPM, or design preservation models, are fantastic little kits, and they're pretty well available worldwide. So no matter where you live, you can probably find a place that carries DPM models. Now, one of the things when you're first looking at for any structure really, is you want to do a little planning on how you're going to build it, the engineering of it, materials, building in subsections, and assembly of substructures, and then detailing and finish and weathering. So a little bit of planning. When you need for a structure. Why do you need a structure? What are you developing? Are you building a little town? Are you building maybe a standalone structure? So you don't want to develop the concept for that type of structure required. And you want, maybe if you want to do something in the prototype, you want to research the prototype. and then find or locate a kit that suits your needs and develop an outline for the assembly. Now, in a lot of small kits, you really don't have to do that. It's all in the plan, so you can just follow the assembly structures. But a lot of people have their own method for building buildings, and so you may want to just jot down how you want to tackle that particular project. And if you're like me and you live in the sort of the boonies, I like to have all my materials right there, the paints, everything I'm going to need before I start the project. So enjoy. Some of the things you want to look for structures, well, one is you have a standard, obviously, is your scale. The era that you're modeling, what does it fit into that time period? Now, a lot of older brick buildings are still around today, so they span a lot of different eras. Location. What's the location that it's going into, and so forth. Now, family resemblance, that's a really big thing. And Perry Lamb talked about that in his earlier clinic about doing locomotives and having a family resemblance. And I really believe in that for structures as well. So don't handcuff yourself by different choices. And for the engineering of it, develop an engineering plan for your structure. You can build in substructures, especially larger buildings. Build one section, build the other section, and then mold them together. You'll find it will reduce your stress in trying to handle a big project. Red Green, some of you know him from his infamous TV shows. And he said, I once took engineering, but I didn't take all of it. And I think that applies to model railroading just to a T, because you have to be able to be a bit of a woodworker to build the bench work. You have to be a bit of an electrician to do the wiring. And for structures, you got to be a little bit of a structural engineer to know how these buildings and so forth go together. So some of you may know where this is. If you do, put it in the comment section and we'll check it later. But these are great examples of almost what a DPM building looks like in many cases. And these are great photos for looking at different coloring. Look at the somewhat natural brick, then you got a painted brick, and the fronts were painted in ornate colors in this particular case. And here's another one sort of across the street, and you can see this one particular one was even plastered over the actual brick and painted. So great ideas for coloring and some signage for your building later on. A big thanks to Miles and Fran Hale. Some of you may know them. They've given lots of demonstrations. Miles in particular, many years ago, I sat in on many of his DPM clinics, and a lot of the tips and tricks I got from him. And another fellow, John Lawrence out of Texas, is another fellow who has just been fantastic. When I was first trying to get my MMR, these guys really helped me out and taught me a lot, and especially about DPM buildings. So one of our Modeling the Masters clinics that we actually did with Miles and John, Miles actually worked for DPM, and he got permission to do this diorama. We did this whole diorama in a weekend. You did the scenery, you built the two buildings, you did some track work, you did all kinds of the sidewalks, some trees, and we did that in a whole weekend. And this was a photo of one of the students' end of projects after the weekend, and I thought it was pretty neat. So this is our little project. This is, I think it's Bruce's Bakery is what it is. And this is an N scale. I did it in N scale because a lot of times guys will do it on HO, and everybody and a lot of the N scale guy goes, the NMRA is just an N scale club. No, it's not. We're any scale. I mean, Kevin did his track work in O scale. I'm doing a building in N scale. So we're open for all scales. Now, just an example, that is the same building, believe it or not, as the previous shot. And here they are side by side. Now, this is what I stress this a lot when I'm doing clinics about lighting. if you have whatever your type of lighting is in your railroad room, you should have that same type of lighting on your workbench. So when you're working on your workbench and you're painting that model, when you transfer it to the layout, it's going to look the same. This is under two different lights, and you'll see what happens to the color. The one on the darker brown with the gray, that's the actual color. So a little construction. Well, let's get to it. First of all, always use a sharp X-Acto knife. It's much safer to use a sharp knife than it is a dull blade, because what you tend to do is force that dull blade, and that's usually when you slip and you will cut yourself. So try and use a real sharp blade in your X-Acto knife when you're starting projects. Remember, don't forget, measure twice, cut once, or my friend Bob here will go to work. And that goes for almost any project of model railroading. One of the things, some small parts on a file card, whoops, what happened there? I usually just put some two-sided tape on, and if I'm going to spray those little parts, it will just keep them in place, and you won't have to find them later. Now, one of the things that we'll talk about is sprues. And sprue is the tree-like molded framework to which molded parts are attached. When they inject the molding liquid plastic into the mold, it goes through those sprues into the parts and makes the parts. And then when they're punched out, they will be sitting out later on. So DPM structures, there's all kinds of fantastic little DPM structures. I think the one we're doing is actually Cricket Saloon or Bruce's Bakery. I think it's the same structure, basically. But these are fantastic little kits. They're very inexpensive, in my opinion, relatively speaking, and I think they're great kits for little towns and so forth. What do you usually get in the kit? Well, you get two sidewalls, front and back walls, door and chimney parts, some material for the styrene, for the roof, and some window material. So here's basically a sidewall in the front, and you'll notice some of the sprue pieces all hanging off of them and so forth. And those flash or sprues are thin ridges, which are usually produced from the injection molded parts. So we're going to clean those up. Now, when you're removing the flash and the sprue pieces, only remove the flash. A lot of times, most of us modelers, we don't need instructions, as they say, and we'll just start cutting or removing pieces. Make sure on the DPMs you don't remove the two molded in chimneys. And when we've done this clinic, we've had that happen. You can use as I said, a sharp X-Acto knife. And the other thing I like to use is sprue cutters for the heavier pieces. You want to remove those with the sprue cutters, and then you can clean them up with the knife. And then you're just going to take off all those pieces. And once you've got those pieces off and you've got them sanded a little bit, or when you go to sand or file them off, you have to make sure there are mating edges and then there are detail edges on a DPM kit. So that top section, you can see where the brick wraps around the edge of the molded piece. That is a detailed edge. You don't want to touch that. Now, on the bottom section, you'll see there is no brick detail. It's just a piece or just the end of the wall. And you want to clean that up. Now, those are the ones you want to clean up. All right. Do not touch the ones with the brick detail. Every molded piece has what they call a draft angle. A draft angle is built into the mold. So when the injector buttons or pins come up through the mold to eject the part, it can come out of the mold much easier. And you got to square those up. Now, you have to watch if it's on a detailed edge, as I showed you in the previous slide, you don't want to touch that. But if it's on a mating edge, you want to square that up. So you can actually see, it's kind of a bad picture of the part, but it actually has an angle to it. And I'll point that out again in a later slide. But you want to take a file or a piece of sandpaper and square that up. The next thing you want to do after you got all the flash and everything cleaned up is you want to put your wall pieces on a piece of paper and just go around with a pencil and make an outline and do it for all your pieces. And you'll have a kind of a weird looking little diagram. And I'll tell you what that's for a little later, and you're going to thank me and say, hey, that's a great tip. And that's kind of what that wall looks like. Okay. Now, a lot of people will use ACC to tack these together. That's a good way to do it. I'm not real crazy about ACC for these models, but I know a lot of people will like to use it as just to hold them together initially, and that's fine. And you may want to use some accelerator with it. I bought one of these off, I think it's the Tool Man that comes to the NMRA conventions, or if he's at a local show, or maybe in the UK, not a vendor. What do you guys call them? I forget now. Anyway, this is basically a stainless steel piece with a little loop on the end, and you dip that into the accelerator, and as soon as you touch it to where the glue is, that accelerator will run out, and it will solidify the ACC. I always laugh, people, ACC, it really dries fairly quickly, but it's like anything. We used to boil hot dogs and people say, oh, it takes so long. And now we microwave them in 20 seconds and people are saying, why does it take so long? Oops. So one thing, plastic cement is not really a cement. It's a solvent. Plastic cement actually melts the two pieces. And then as it evaporates, it forms that strong bond. Okay. And that goes for almost any liquid plastic cement. Now, this is one of those tips that Miles and John gave me, is Faller Expert liquid plastic cement is go ahead and is a fantastic glue for this product. So once we have everything cleaned up and we've made a little sketch of all the parts, we're going to glue them together. And DPM, when they were designed, is pretty cool how the parts go together. So the front wall and the back wall go inside the two outside walls. Okay, and you'll just have to watch. You look at where the mating surfaces are and where the detail surfaces are, and that will tell you how they glue up. Now, most of the times we would put a front and a side together and then the back and the other side together and form the two L's so we can get them nice and square with a square. And then you join them together. Well, the DPM kits are built a little differently. So you actually want to put the two sides on to the front first. Okay. Now, in every single kit that DPM makes, the back wall will not be the same as dimensionally as the front. And the reason for that, from what I understand, is that DPM initially was designed as a modular system. So they had walls, they had fronts, they had sidewalls, they had all kinds of different parts. And then they started putting them together as kits. Well, that back wall didn't match the front. And I've seen many new modelers just glue them in, and then you get this triangular shaped building. you have to cut the back wall to fit the front wall. And you can see how big this back wall is compared to that front wall. And here it is from the side, okay, or from the top view, I should say. And you can see we're about the thickness of the side wall that we have to cut to get it to fit. All right. And we're going to do that. Now, as I said, remember that detailed end of the wall that had the brick on it? And you can see that draft angle on this bottom lower corner on the right-hand side where the back of the wall is. You can see that gap because you can see the angle. But that wall is going to go on the inside of that, and you really won't notice that that angle. Okay, so here now I've cut the wall, and you can use a number of things. The best thing I think is a Zona saw, and measure it to the front of the wall, and then cut it. So here it is here. Now, one of the things that I was taught when I was doing these models was to leave a little recess. So you can see the wall isn't quite flush. Now, I've kind of over exaggerated here so you could see it in the picture, but I leave a little recess on each of the walls. So when I put them together, there's just a 1/16 of an inch recess in there. And what that does later on, it will create a shadow in that corner. And it's one of those little details that when you look at the model, you go, that looks great. And you don't know why, but that little recess is one of the reasons. All right. Now, in the N scale one, this is pretty easy. You just add the door in, and you just want to make sure that it fits properly and add it in. Now, I like to, in this particular case, I'm using a pair of calipers, and I'm just measuring the inside for the roof. But you can just use a ruler, and it works just as well. And then out of the roof material, the thin styrene, I measured out the roof size and cut it. Now, if you've never cut styrene before, you basically need a little square. I've marked it off. And again, my sharp X-Acto knife, and I just make maybe one or two light cuts in through the styrene. I'm not really trying to go right through it because we can break and snap it. So you bend it down, then you bend it up, and it will come apart. So then you want to test fit it, okay, and make sure it's fairly tight. And then we got to add the other side of the chimney. And so in your pieces of the DPM kit, you'll find a little chimney piece. Now, there are two sizes of chimneys here, and they have an angle. So you have to find in the instructions, it'll tell you which chimney is which. And when you look at them, it's a very slight angle, but there is an angle, and you have to glue that appropriate chimney to the front, which has a little stronger angle, and then less in the back. So you just glue it in, and once it's in, then you can, now you can see here, I don't know if you can see it in this picture, I was trying to get it, but there's an angle to that when it's glued in. And you want to clean off the tops, make sure it's nice and even once you got it glued in. And I take a little file and make sure my windows, there's no flash in it, and we're all set to go. In an N scale one, you can basically just put the roof in, and if you put it right up to the bottom of those chimney pieces, it will fit perfectly generally, and have the correct angle because it'll just follow the chimney angles. Here it is here. Now, in the HO kits, they give you a small piece of styrene and you should glue it in. It'll give, because the roof is obviously bigger, it will give you a lot more strength and support. Now, to prove any plastic model, you want to paint it with some earth tones or a flat finish paint to give you a really nice, excuse me, really nice professional look to the model. So in this particular case, we're going to just use a Krylon sandable primer. You can buy it at any hobby shop. You can use, some of the Master Model paints. I don't even know if they're still around anymore. Or you can use an airbrush. But I find this just an easy way to do this. And we'll take the sandable primer. I put a toilet roll paper up into the middle of the little building, and then I can use that as a paint holder. And I just spray the paint over the model. Make sure you get inside where the roof is going to go, because that roof is actually shallow to the edge of the building. And when you're doing this, you don't have to get it totally even. No brick is totally even. Matter of fact, in most buildings, the builder would only put good brick in the front of the structure. And he would use, and I forget what the correct term is, they would basically use builder's brick for the sides and the back, because when you're sort of on a street, you want your building to look nice and sharp. So you put the more expensive brick in the front, and just, brick the rest of the building with the cheapest stuff you can find. Now, here's another one that I did by holding that same color about 2 feet away and just dusted it on. And because of the natural color of the plastic that it's molded in, you got this sort of stipple effect. And it's a really quick way of changing the look of the same building. That's exactly the same building that we started off with. Now, to do the windows and doors and some of the trim, you just use the cheap or inexpensive paints, such as from Michaels, a little it doesn't matter if it's Delta or Americana or whatever you can get, Apple Barrel, whatever you can get your hands on, or even Polyscale. And we're going to paint all the trim. Now, you can decide what colors to paint it and so forth. That's totally up to you. I like a little angled brush because I can get into the corners nice. Now, sometimes you have to maybe do 2 coats in order to get a coverage, especially if it's a little lighter color over a darker red for the brick. Now, you can always paint it gray and then, apply a white over it or something, a very light color over it. All right, so here we are here. Now, if you get a little paint on the brickwork, what you want to do is get a little plastic cup, shoot some paint from the spray can into that cup, and put whatever, so if it's an oil-based paint, you want to put a little paint thinner in there, and then you can actually brush that color back onto the brick to cover up your little mistakes with the brush. All right, now another method, and I don't know if he's on or not, but Lionel Strang showed me this one time when he was doing DPM buildings. He says, I hate painting by brush. So what he did was he took some masking tape and taped off the whole side of the building. And then he cut out the windows with a nice sharp X-Acto knife. And then he just took a can of spray paint and sprayed them and peeled off the tape, obviously. And you get something like that.
Clark, if Lionel was here, he would give you the 30-minute warning.
Thank you. So this is kind of that N scale one that I have painted. I believe this one was one of mine. So it's all nice and neat. And then you can add some signs. This is just a paper sign. What I did is sanded it first and got it really thin. Put some white glue, just basic white glue on. I put my hand in a Ziploc baggie, and I pushed it into the brick. If you don't put your hand into a baggie, what will happen is the glue will get on your finger, and because of the heat of your body will start to dry, and then you start to peel the sign up. So by using that baggie, it just keeps it nice and smooth. Anyway, if you remember back to why the heck did we make all those little drawings of all the building sites? Well, in the kit, they give you a piece of clear acetate. So what you do, you can cut that clear acetate and make sure it covers all the windows, and test fit it into the building and make sure that it's will fit into the building. And then you're going to tape it over that diagram. And now you know where to put the decals. And decals are just transfer pieces where you can get a logo or whatever is printed onto the clear film, and you soak it in water and you release this from the paper and you apply it to your model, in this case the window. Or a dry transfer, which is it's usually put on a flexible plastic backing, and it's kind of pressure sensitive, and then it's on a sort of a wax carrier. And then when you rub it onto the whatever it is that you're rubbing it onto, it transfers over, hence dry transfer. And so this was just the Woodland Scenics dry transfers. And I placed it over the exact window because I know exactly where it's going to go because I made that little drawing. And you can buy high-end burnishers, from an art supply store. They'll have some real high-end stuff. But actually, the Woodland Scenics ones are really good. They just work really well. So I have one of those. And here it is. I've burnished it onto that acetate. And I know it's going to fit right in that window. And here's another one. I put the ice in on the other side. And you can also buy from Woodland Scenics a roof and trim kit. So you can buy little things. Now you can also just make them out of styrene and glue them on top of your roof as well. The nice thing about the roof and trim kit, they have this interior trim that really finishes off that building. They do make some neat stuff. So here's that one piece. This is actually an HO piece that I think we took at one of the modeling in the master section. So here this gentleman has got his windows in and everything else. We've taken a little bit of chalks and come down the windows. He's put some roof details on. I believe this is HO. And so forth. Now, in the HO one, the door is actually concaved, and there's three pieces to the door. There's two side pieces, and then the door itself. So you have to build that up and put that in. Okay. So here's one. A lot of times, if the building is going to go next to another building or so forth, I don't even paint the other windows. Okay, so adding some details, as I mentioned, you can add some signs, you can add the roof pieces. Here's a shot from above for like a restaurant or so. You got a big blower and an exhaust fan, and then you can add interiors and some trucks out front, and it really will set off your little DPM kit. Now, one of the great products that has just come out is called Roomettes. You can look them up on the webpage. Roomettes has got tons of foldable interiors, and they actually come with LED lighting. I believe it's the Woodland Scenics ones, and they're so fantastic. We've done a couple clinics recently where we've done the hands-on DPM kits, and we've actually put the Roomettes in them, and they've been really well received, and they're fantastic little kits. So it's Roomettes, and you can look for them on the World Wide Web, as they say. Now this is a shot. This is just a rough shot of my own layout. All these are DPM buildings that were built, and there's just sitting on a piece of half-inch styrofoam in behind a yard. This is very early on in the construction of this layout, so things are coming along. But you'll see there's a little hump right in the middle, and that's just because the styrofoam is kind of buckled up there. But we'll flatten that out, and maybe in a future clinic we'll see how that one comes along. So that was the little project, and it came out really well. So if you're an N scaler, don't be afraid to try DPM. If you're an O scaler, you can get O scale DPM pieces, and certainly an HO. Whoops. So that's it. And I'll see if I can unshare, and then we can ask questions. Okay, Gert, I think we're back.
So first question, are there any videos on adding a peaked roof to a DPM kit?
Not that I know of, but you could certainly do that. I think you could just build up a peaked roof with styrene and fit it to the top and make it a peaked roof. I don't think that would be too difficult at all.
Okay. Do you ever have your applicator tips getting clogged?
Yes, every once in a while, those especially like the Faller, because they're a very thin tube. I have a little piece of brass wire that I stick down there, and I just clean it out. Okay. Some guys will take a little bit of the lighter to it, a little bit of heat, and it will melt. But you have to be a little careful. I'm really hesitant in doing that because the stuff is flammable.
Okay. Do you do mortar lines in N scale? And if so, how?
I'm sorry. Oh, do I want mortar lines? I'm not a big mortar line guy. Every once in a while, I do it in N scale. I like Roberts brick mortar. It's a compound that in the back of Model Railroader they have a little ad, and I'm not sure if they might not be an NMRA partner now, but I really like Roberts brick mortar. You put it on, it dries, you take a damp sponge and wipe it off. And the nice thing about that compared to paint or any of the other applications that you can do, you can come back in a week, you can come back in 2 weeks and still wipe it off. Whereas some of the other ones, it's pretty time sensitive.
Do you know if buildings from the 50s and 60s need sewer line vents on the roof?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know that one. But, any kind of vent on the roof is plausible. So I don't think it's always an added detail. So I think you can add as many vents as you want.
What color would you do that in?
That's a good question. I don't know what color I would do it in. I'd have to research that one. I'll be honest.
And then the super important question here is, can you use a DPM kit to get a merit award?
Well, yeah, I've seen DPM kits get merits, but you have to add a heck of a lot of material and interiors and do a lot of scratch building with it. Okay. And then your assembly of the actual structure has to be perfect. When I do AP judging or what I always suggest to people is go and be a judge first and then get into the AP program. You're going to learn what the judges are looking for. Second of all, you have to pick a model that will maximize your points. And generally, a kit or a plastic structure doesn't do that. Doesn't mean you can't, but it makes it, you got to really work at it to add the other stuff in order to make it a merit model.
Okay. Do you ever add lighting in the buildings or
Yes,
wall paintings?
for wall painting. Sorry.
But I'm asking, do you put lighting in, and do you
Oh
also
yes.
put
Yeah,
put
I put a lot of lighting into structures lately. Um, Mostly LEDs, and I've been fooling around with Arduinos to change the lighting so that, let's say, in a business, the lighting goes off, and then maybe the upstairs lighting would come on, signifying he's closed the shop and now he's upstairs in his apartment. So I've been fooling around a lot. Our Arduinos. Oh, it looks like Gert's got one there,
I think I
and
have a product for you.
and I really enjoy that. That is kind of, I'm not a real electronics guy, but I certainly really enjoy learning about it, and that's one of the great things. Oh, they can't. Well, that was kind of the. That was
Well,
kind of the.
the Darth Vader.
I need a haircut like everybody else. Well,
Is
maybe
it
not
better,
Gert.
is it better to detail all the walls first and then put the building together?
That's kind of if I'm doing a plastic kit, usually I put them together first. If I'm doing a laser or a wood kit, then I do them separately.
Okay.
But that's a personal thing. You develop as you build, and more you build and you get comfortable with, you develop your own technique. And for me to say, oh no, do it this way, I don't think that's fair, because whatever works for you.
So that's the end of the questions. I would please ask you to go to the feed and see how many good comments you got there. You're already famous, and
There's
I'll be
probably
quite
two
famous
good
too.
ones. But again, thank you very much to all the hosts and you, Gert, and Brad was on earlier, and to Gordy, of course, for setting this up. And we'll see. I'm trying to do a live from the last clinic I did. Everybody was asking me about the rock mold, so I'm trying to do a live rock mold clinic for the next one. We'll see if we can get that done, and we'll go from there. But thank you very much, and to all the viewers out there, if you're not an NMRA member, you should join and show support for this program, and you're really going to enjoy the association.
Thank you. We're looking forward to having you again.
Thanks now. Bye now.